So next, we're going to take a brief look at time windows. Time windows can be added to transactions, and they're a useful mechanism to establish when a transaction happened on a particular timeline. The reason we use windows instead of points in time is because there's no true time in a distributed ledger. There's just a whole bunch of desynchronized clocks. This is a constraint of the laws of physics, and there's no way to get around this. So instead of asserting that the transaction occurred at a point in time, we just say that the transaction occurred within a particular time window. The time windows can be open-ended. So if you want to assert that a transaction happened after a specified time, then you can do that very easily. You just specify a before point and no after point. In the same way, if you want to assert that a transaction happened before a specific time, then you simply specify the after point and no before point. If we want to specify a close window, then we simply specify both points. The purpose of a time window is to communicate the transaction's position on the timeline, mainly for the enforcement of contractual logic, say for instance the redemption of a bond or the late payment of a debt. If for some reason you need a point in time instead of a window, what you generally do is take both ends of the time window and simply calculate the midpoint. The Corda Transaction Builder gives you a bunch of methods for adding a time window to your transaction, and you can specify whether the window is open-ended or closed. Now, for a time window to have any value, the implications of it must be legally binding to those specifying it. How can we prevent parties from ignoring the time window? What we need is some objective observer or timestamping authority to assert that a transaction happened before, after, or at a specified time. This timestamping authority in Corda is provided by the notary service that we're going to discuss in subsequent webinars. This means that if there's a time window in your transaction, it requires a signature by the notary service. How do you add a time window to a transaction? To add a time window to a transaction, you would decide on some time tolerance, some buffer around a particular time, maybe a 30-second window, a 20-second window, or a 10-second window, depending on the network latency and how long you think it would take to get the transaction signed. You then add this time window to the transaction. The Corda platform then ensures that the transaction must be signed within that window by the notary service. If the transaction is not signed within that window, then it's not valid. That's it for time windows. They simply assert that a transaction happened within a specified period of time. They can either be closed or open-ended.